Well, hello, Dwayne. Welcome to the show. It is great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for quite a long time. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. We're glad to be here and talk shop with you.
It's one of my favorite things to do is talk shop. So let's get into it. I'd love to have you share your background, your company's background, of course, but let's start with just kind of what your company looks like today, what Concise, what you specialize in, what type of machines, what types of industries, size, whatever you want to share to give people, paint the picture of what the company is like today.
Okay, we're a precision machine shop. We're located in Salisbury, North Carolina, north of Charlotte. We specialize in 5-axis, specifically unattended machining. So we were looking for complex, feature-rich parts that we can run unattended. And really, if the more that we can focus on complexity or that unattended aspect of it, the better fit it is for us. So we've got about 10 people. Just kind of crossing that threshold. We've had a lot of part-time people, contractors, things of that nature, but we're really crossing the threshold of having 10 full-time people here right now. So a lot of growth, a lot of change, a lot of communication. That's just all part of that growth or growing pains, really, of company scaling up.
And how many machines do you guys have today?
We've got, 2, 3, 5, so about 10 machines.
Okay, that's a good amount of machines for 10 people. And so given the fact that you specialize in lights out, unattended, 5-axis type machine, I imagine you're pumping out a lot more parts than a typical 10-person shop would if they're just focused on their sort of day shift, vertical, whatever types of.
Well, I wish that were the case, and some days it is, but it's an elusive goal, really, and it's a hungry beast as you build it. So it's I've listened to numerous episodes of your podcast and heard you share. You guys kind of went the opposite direction, I believe, of what we have. We started off with prototyping, and then we've kind of flip-flopped towards higher quantities. Not that we've forsaken the lower quantities or the prototyping at all. It just has to be the right fit. So, finding the right parts, but also having capacity that it kind of goes against your nature you want every spindle running, but to have capacity and be responsive, that's not necessarily always the case. So, it does weigh on your mind though, when you a silent shop or you're not hearing those spindles run. Sometimes it's, you're like, I'm ready for that thing going,
Yes, I totally feel you on that one. Yeah, having a shop with not many spindles turning is definitely a disheartening sound or lack of sound. So, let's talk about the origins of your shop, and your background as well. What did you do before starting your shop?
Yeah, so I've been in machining really since high school. So I graduated in '94, so I'm coming up on 30 years. Well, actually, I graduated in '93. I got married in '94. So,
okay.
I really didn't know what machining was. I was a freshman in high school. I wanted to take auto mechanics, and the only way they would let you take auto mechanics as a freshman was you had to take this it was a course, and you took 4 different classes for 9 weeks each. You could take 9 weeks of machine shop, 9 weeks of drafting, 9 weeks of electronics, and you got 9 weeks of auto mechanics in there. And I never took auto mechanics again. I took machining for 3 years, electronics for 3 years, and drafting for 2 years. And I just remember walking into the machine shop there. Mr. Hurd was my teacher, and I just saw the metal coming off on the lathe, and I was like, "Wow! I just didn't know you could do that." I just thought it was amazing. And I know I'm doing the right thing, because even when we set the machines up today and I go out into the shop and it's, peeling the metal off, I'm just mesmerized by it. So it's really, it's just fascinating to me that it's like violent and subtle at the same time. It's just such an artistry that goes on, and your imagination and your creativity. I always tell people, because in conversations, people know what plumbers are or welders are, or a lot of the trades, but they have no idea what a machinist is. A large portion of society, So I'd say, look,
Unfortunately
if you
true.
like, if you like playing with Legos and you like playing video games, like this is a great career for you because it's like a shop full of Legos. You have your problem you have to solve, and you have to solve it with your box of Legos. And the
Hmm.
programming is a lot like playing video games because that's problem solving, steps to get to a goal. That's really what this, every business is a problem solving business, but I feel like this one is even more so because of you're working in collaborative way with your customers oftentimes, especially as we're beginning. So our origin, my origin there was began in high school. I came out of high school without a lot of direction, honestly. I mean, I liked machining, but I was not interested in school at all. And
Hmm.
I found my way to a temporary agency, and I was kind of bouncing around to some different places. I worked in a big press room, and I was on a secondary press, and absolutely hated that. Just being literally tethered to a machine all day because of the safety, features. It
Right.
would, when the die would cycle, it you were tethered to it, so it would pull your hands out, and
Oh,
just
wow.
was absolute misery. Like running production like that.
Sure.
And then I ran some screw machines for a while, and was on a machine one day and I was running high sulfur oil, and the coolant line hose broke off, and that stuff shot all over my chest. And I was just like, forget this, man. I am not doing this. But found my way back to that same company on, and they said, hey, if you'll come back, we'll give you an opportunity in the CNC department, and started on night shift running CNC lathes. And
Hmm.
really just worked a bunch of different jobs. I think the first 10 years I was in this trade, I never made it anywhere 2 years. And it was like drama or politics or, just boredom. And I was, going from shop to shop. And I know that sounds kind of not what a lot of the industry wants to hear, but that's where I found myself.
Right.
Um, and so that really doesn't scare me away when I look at resumes. I'm like, hey, I can relate to that. I can understand that.
Sure.
But I found myself running CNC lathes and production. Then I went to another job where I could get still run CNC lathes, but I was on a night shift, and I had a gentleman there that was supposed to kind of be my lead, and the way it worked out, like the second day there, he quit, and so I had
Oh my.
I had a manager that was like, "Here's a stack of orders. Go through this stack of orders. Is there anything you think you want to try to do? Just go ahead and try it." And so that was really good. And I found that gentleman years later, and I thanked him, and he hardly remember. He's like, I don't even remember, making an impact on you, but he
Sure.
did. He kind of, let me loose. And then back in that time, this is in the mid '90s, maybe '96 or something like that. And I'm like, uh, if you go somewhere to apply for a job, they may say, well, I don't have any lathe openings, but I got mill openings. I'm like, well, I want to learn how to run mills too. So no matter what, I've got the most opportunity
Hmm.
to kind of do things in this trade. So
Sure.
I took pay cuts. I changed jobs because I was like, well, I want to learn that, and I was willing to say, I'll risk, you know, what might not seem like the smartest of moves on the outside to just go get those opportunities.
Hmm.
And so that was really how I cut my teeth. You work with a lot of different people, and
Yeah.
all those people have different approaches, and you kind of just take the good things. And I say the modern day iteration of this company is from working for and with a lot of not very nice people and some really good
Hmm.
people along the way, but there's definitely some things out of those experiences I said we are not going to do here, and there's some that I said we are, we're gonna do more of that. But yeah, learning it, coming up through the shops and all different industries, which would kind of segue into our growth here as a company. In the beginning, you're trying to understand how to get customers. You're trying to understand how to just how to get yourself known in the industry. And so when I talk about growing and having different people in the organization, early on we could take on just about any type of job because through all those experiences, I was able to work in automotive, and had a job where I worked in landing gear. We were making gigantic landing gear for everything from the Joint Strike Fighter to the A380, and worked in some automotive and some die and mold and things like that. So early on in this company, we could do a wider variety of jobs for all different types of customers. But as we grow, that becomes more and more difficult
Hmm.
because not everybody knows how to navigate that so well. And as we begin to
Sure.
delegate tasks to other people, communication just becomes more and more critical. And I think every way you can miscommunicate, we have probably done that at one point in time or another.
Oh, that was a lot of good stuff. Yeah, I definitely want to dig more into communication and systems and scalability. But I'm intrigued by your comments about working in shops where there's a lot of drama and politics, and then some not nice people. Yeah, can you just elaborate on that? What was it the situation where you had shop owners or leaders that just didn't have people skills as a primary skill? Like, were they good technically, but just kind of, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think I've probably seen all of those situations where you had people that were great technically, but they didn't have the social skills. And honestly, in a lot of those environments, there really wasn't vision, and there wasn't a priority placed on that. So, and that's not to fault the folks that I worked for or any of those people that were in those various positions, but it just, you can be there and be like, there's got to be a better way, and to my own credit, I mean, I was young and I didn't have good communication skills either. So, I mean, it would be easy for me to mouth off or be smart, in a moment where I could have perhaps smooth things over. I may have chose to, give an incendiary comment that would just ratchet things up. But you learn, and we all have our part in those situations. But I do think that sometimes, I've seen situations where families were in the business, right, and they would have been better off just to pay those people to stay and just wrote them a check, because it was kind of a toxic element, right, and not knowing where to have those boundaries and knowing where to have communication skills. You see a lot of shared knowledge or not shared knowledge, right, where people would. Mm-hmm. I've worked in shops where people would hide the manuals and hide the books, and I've seen it where people sabotage other people, like, so that stuff would break, and so it's just so disheartening to think that could be somebody's mindset. But unfortunately, that does occur. So it just really made me have a hunger to want to share, and to if we're all working together and want to be there, then it's such a better environment.
Mm-hmm. With those, I imagine, just tactics for sort of keeping their jobs secure, so someone else didn't know something that they knew. And
yeah, I think there was some of that. I think at the end of the day, and not to get too psychoanalyst on it, but it probably all is just rooted really in some insecurity somewhere along the line that people don't address. And so even here in the last quarter of the year leading into 2023, as I explained, there's a lot of technical things we need to accomplish as a company. Mm-hmm. But really the top three things we had our focus on going into this year is how can we increase every single person, including mine, how can we increase every single person's emotional intelligence, their leadership abilities, and their time management. Because if we can excel at those three things, and I'm not talking about everybody has to be a 10, but if we can move the needle with everybody on that, then we're just going to be more efficient at understanding the customer's problems, understanding the hurdles that we face, how do we work together to get to a solution. So really, when we're talking about the company and where it is today, I've spent the last 5+ years really laying a lot of foundation. And, there's a community college here, RCCC, and we've got some entrepreneurial resources for, pause that. They've got some entrepreneurial resources for folks. And I went and talked to this lady. Her name was Maggie Braun. She was in her 70s, I think, when I spoke to her. And this was being 2014, 2015. But she asked me really up front, why do you want your own business? Do you want a company, or just do you want your own business? Do you just not want to work for somebody? And it really forced me up front to ask the question and answer it. Yeah, I want a company, and okay, what kind of sales do you want? And so we said an initial goal of 10 million, right? But the difference between having your own company or having your own business and then actually saying, I want an enduring organization, and building a company, and it's like a second full-time job. Sometimes it's more than a second full-time job, it feels like. but it's really laid into that foundation of how do we pour into people, build people, empower people. Really, we just need to give them what they need in terms of resources and training, and get out of their way. And so it's taken a long time for me to learn that, how to do that. I've always wanted to do it, but I'm surprised how often I can find myself in the way.
Wow, that was a lot of super great knowledge. Concepts. So let's talk about, I love this whole notion of those 3 basic skills and building an enduring company. And I agree that those are critical to doing so. And then provide the vision, the resources, the training, and get out of the way. So how have you learned, or what have you learned to really try to upskill your team in all those areas? The practical, tactical ways you actually are doing that.
Well, we kind of have a policy, that everybody in the company can go to anybody else in the company and just say what needs to be said. It doesn't give you the right to be rude, and you don't need to take it like a baby if you're told that. And it takes a little while for people to wrap their head around it. Hey, you actually mean that, right? A lot of people maybe say that, but one of the terms we use is Christmas list. Like, tell me your Christmas list. What do you want? How many hours do you want to work? How much money do you want to make? What do you want to do? What do you not want to do? Really communicating and just understanding what people actually want to do. Now, can we satisfy everything on that Christmas list? Probably not. But if we know 10 things you want, we can satisfy 6 or 7 or 8 of them, then you're going to be much more fulfilled than if we're only blindly hitting 3 of them.
Sure.
So, that goes back into the emotional intelligence part of it. Candor. I mean, it's a lot of, coaching people. It's okay to have candor, both directions. We actually have so when I talk about, part-time folks, contractors, we have early on adopted the philosophy that it's better to have a part-time rock star than a full-time mediocre person. So we've got a gentleman, Anthony, that works with everybody. He's talented in so many different areas. We could plug him in operations or lean or, root cause analysis. I mean, he's just phenomenally talented, but with the bandwidth that he has to be here, it's almost exclusively devoted toward employee coaching. He'll find out what the spouse of that employee likes for dinner. He'll pick up dinner, go to their house, with their permission. He's not just going to show up, but hey, come over, talk to you. Can I get your input on how we're doing, in this relationship? Because we don't want to be in competition with the spouses at all. I mean, that's we want it to be a blessing. We want you to feel like it's a blessing that you're a part of what we're doing here. So I think probably the terminology we use for that is we're way more interested in a holistic approach to employee success. And if you're amazing at technical things here, or we're killing it in certain aspects, but you're not able to show up as a father or a husband or or as a wife because, you're stressed out about work. That's a longer game type approach. Obviously, we say we play for the long game, but if you don't manage the short game, there is no long game. So we have to balance all that with profitability and making money and satisfying the customer's needs, but we don't really view that as a either or. So that approach was really born out of some heartbreak early on, early in the company. It's just like attrition, like tons of hours, impossible ask, just delivering the moon over and over, and that takes a toll. So you figure out, although that's a way that you can kind of get up off the ground with some inertia or momentum, right? It's not sustainable. And so we had some people that have left, and we've had some lessons that we've learned that way. And then I would say that we've had people that would have left had we not had Anthony in this coaching role, right? Because we're able to get that feedback. So I could probably talk the rest of the time on this one topic, but we have some really unique ways. And I don't really go into all of them just due to length of time, but we have a visionary way that we think we can transform the employee experience, the customer experience, and the vendor experience to really make it, when they see the phone call, come in from us, it's not going to be, ugh, I don't want to take this call, but it's going to be a good experience. And I know that this is not a pro shop, podcast, but pro shop is a part of how we do that. Just the knowledge and the information, and again, as we talk about scaling, when you're taking a task or a customer project from cradle to grave, there's just so much that you're doing intuitively along the way that you take for granted. And I'm sure you may have experienced at some point in business ownership that you were explaining to someone how you did something. And as you begin to explain it, you realize just how many workarounds you have incorporated into your routine. And it's kind of like embarrassing, So, as you're taking it cradle to grave, and now you're dividing that up between the quoting and the manufacturing planning and the setup and the programming and the QC inspection and the shipping. Now there's, 10 times the opportunities for a mistake or for something to not go as planned. And so, machining is such a capital intensive business. I, as the owner, want the machines to run 24/7 if possible, but can't burn people out. So we kind of envision, like a ABCD team where you got some 4-day work weeks and 3-day work weeks, and you have more people involved. And man, if you think it's hard to execute the jobs we do with 8 or 10 people, how much more paramount is the communication going to be for success or failure when you get that many people involved? So again, if we look at it in the long game like that, and we back up and we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about leadership, we talk about time management, the better we are at those things, in addition to the technical aspect of it, then we feel like we don't really see a way to succeed without being very competent at those things.
I think we're going to have to do a second episode in the future. This is so good. So you talked about designing, or the experience that the employee, customers, and vendors would have. And I agree, we can't get into it that deep, at least on this episode. Are there any sort of core principles that span all three of those that you can touch on at least?
Well, the one thing we can say is no matter what relationship you have with Concise, we want it to be a blessing. We want you to feel as if it's a blessing, and not just feel it. I mean, we actually want that to be the experience. So I think in a leadership position, it's hard to overshare. I mean, obviously you can overshare and bore people to death, but the consistency with which you have to reiterate the vision. Hey, there's a lot of change coming. Hey, there's a lot of moving parts. Hey, we're not going to get it all right, but I promise you we'll figure it out. And including people to say, this is a tough problem. It's a really tough problem. I've heard you guys say on this podcast before that it's your belief that machining is the most difficult business to manage, right? It feels a little bit presumptive for me to say that because it's the only business I've ever really been in, but I would believe it because it's got a lot of moving parts and it's very unforgiving. You look at a print and there's 1,000 ways to kill a part. It's just, depending on the sector of business that you're in, it's very, very unforgiving. So we want to communicate to the team members. We want to communicate with the customers and the vendors, and but I would say the end result that we're looking for is that everybody feels like they're happy to have a relationship. And if we're not achieving that, then why? And so, again, that'll all come back to communication, how well we communicate with each one of those stakeholders in the equation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, you're onto some really important stuff. And I think there are topics that many shops don't consider well enough, and probably the ones that you worked for in the beginning of your career that weren't great experiences is probably what helped inform your focus on making this an important part of your business, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the greatest things that I get to experience, I love making parts and I love making the machines do what they're capable of doing. really, when I said I didn't work anywhere until the 10th year of my career, over 2 years, when I finally got to that place, I had two guys that I worked for that were very influential to me in my life, and they turned me loose. Like, here's the key to the shop. If you want to go, go, right. And I was on the EDMs and the milling machines and the CMM, and man, I was just soaking it up. I can remember sitting at a computer station, and I was doing all this surfacing and just 3D work, and it's what I just wanted to do for so long, and I'd had so many roadblocks to get there. And I can remember just sitting in that seat, just feeling giddy, like, ooh, I'm getting to do what I want, right? And that's an amazing feeling. And then understanding all the processes in the shop. How can I take this part and program it and process it up to this certain point? Then I'm going to take it off and put it on another piece of machinery and do a whole different process. And how can I tie all that in with, quick change work holding and fixturing? And man, when you have that level of mastery, machine shop mastery, then it's a very satisfying feeling. But when you watch somebody walk in, we always talk about Peyton is one of my guys. You'd be good to do a podcast with him, but we always joke about when he first came, I had a drawer at the EDM, and I said, hey, take this Kaizen foam and fix this drawer up. And the result that we got was just like, oh my goodness, like this is not good, right? And then I'd ask him to run an air hose, and he ran this air hose, and he just tucked it in almost like you would look under the hood of a show car, right? It was just like tied and pulled in there. And we always talk about it of those two things. When I watched him do the drawer, he didn't think about whether anything needed to be in the drawer or not. He just made a spot for everything that was in there, and he put it in there. And I was like, oh my Lord, like there's no forethought. I was like, but then when I watched him run this air hose, I'm like, okay, you got it. You have got the building blocks that can get you to be a good programmer because of that attention to detail and thinking through. But we always joke about that being like, the two sides of a coin early on. And I guess that's the lead into me saying the most satisfying thing I've experienced is when you see somebody walk in and you see certain parts of their personality or how they approach their work or just how they're wired. And you're like, ooh, you're going to be a really good fill in the blank, like programmer or setup person or QC person. And then you see those things in your brain that they're going to be able to accomplish, but they don't see it yet. And then 2-3 years, sometimes it's 2-3 months later, you're seeing them accomplish that thing that they couldn't see. That is by far the most satisfying thing that I've experienced in a leadership role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, being able to build a place, a culture, a team that people can thrive and feel like they're a part of and love what they do. Yeah. And maybe even get them to do more than they ever thought, I agree, is immensely satisfying. And not everyone feels that way. So not every owner feels like that's one of the most satisfying parts of it. And I think that's probably what makes you a good owner and a good leader, is because you do care about those things, right?
Well, I've always said, if you commit yourself to the fundamentals, everything else will take care of itself, right? The money will take care of itself. I mean, you have to be fiscally responsible, right? I mean, there's lots of things we want. There's lots of resources that would help. But we also just learn to view that as a competitive advantage. So the fact that we don't have all the resources that some organizations may have, that we kind of have to work and make do with what we have until we can get to that next step. It really creates a kind of a scrappiness or a grittiness about the group that when you do get more resources, you kind of use them with the same mindset and instead of just throwing money. And you can just throw talent at a problem too, the same way you can throw money. And it doesn't work the same as when you're trying to have that scrappy, gritty approach, kind of built into the DNA of the company.
Right. So when you first, we could talk about this specific topic for probably hours. When you first started your shop, how long ago was that? I don't think we heard when you started the company.
So 2016 is when I shipped the first parts.
Okay. So about 7 years ago or so. And And were you always going to be focused on 5-axis unattended, or was that an evolution? And how did you get there?
Well, I was known for that. I've got a lot of experience in that. And so when we first had the first machine was a 3-axis mill, a Micron with a 42,000 RPM spindle. The second machine or piece of equipment I bought was a CMM. So had a 3-axis, very nice mill, and then as ICMM. And that was a really good second move because we were able just early on to provide inspection results and kind of get a little bit different market than, say, the typical person starting in their garage. So I started in a 1,500 square foot garage behind my house. Kind of bought a used machine that didn't run. Took me quite a while to get it rebuilt. Kind of like a hot rod barn find, you know. Mm-hmm. Had to replace the spindle or a lot of electronic components. The company that had ran this machine ran graphite and did hard milling, so the oil, but they never really cleaned it. They didn't do very much maintenance. So I bought it on a shoestring budget, and then took me about a year and a half or more to kind of get where I could actually make parts. And I did some contract programming in that time. But when we got to making some chips and then could do the inspection with it, that was a good move. So we were getting 5-axis parts there early on, but making 5-axis parts on a 3-axis machine is a tough way to make a living. So fixturing. And then that led us to some quick change fixturing. We had 3R from really early on, the macro, like the 2-inch-ish platform. We had that from early on, but really we made a change to go to the Lang system. And that added another machine at that point. I got a used DMG Mori from a gentleman that I had known and done some business with him in the past, but he had a shop and was closing it. And he had this one piece of equipment. He needed to get it out of the building. He said, "Hey, I need to sell this machine. I think you're a straight up guy. From the time that I've known you, I'll own or finance it. I just have to get it out of this building." And so I think the machine had like 600 hours on it. It was hardly used. Wow. And eventually I put a 4th axis on it, and then we got Lang, and we put a chuck on the table, and we put a chuck on the rotary, and then I could do more stuff, but not compound angles without doing additional fixturing. But it just began to open up doors. And then so in that 1,500 square foot building, I had 2 verticals, a wire EDM, a grinder, a lathe, CMM, and we just stuffed into this building. And I'd had a 400 amp 3-phase service there, and and then we were getting that work all along, but that building was kind of full, and every machine that I bought really has been like a long shot. Well, yeah, I probably, can't afford it, or don't need to look at it, or don't have room for it, or don't have work for it. And then you kind of go and you look at it and you kick the tires, and it just ends up, working out. Right. And, so my first 5-axis machine was kind of the same way, but then I'm like, okay, I want to get this machine, but I can't fit it in the building. I either got to sell something or I got to find a new building. And I was driving by, I'm about 3 miles from my house now. I was driving by, this building had just come up for lease that day, or maybe within that 1 or 2 day window. Oh, wow. And I stopped in here, and the guy had a printing business here, and he had moved out all the presses, but because he had presses, he had 1,000 amp service. You go to a lot of buildings and you look, and they've got maybe ample floor space. Maybe they don't have the greatest floors, but a lot of them don't have the right power. So we had some decent concrete on the floors. We had good power, and then we were able to move up here. But once we really got the 5-axis machine, and that machine had a 7 pallet changer on it. Once we did that, we were kind of off to the races as far as being responsive. And the automation is a big part of it. I mean, it's, people say oftentimes, well, I don't have production, but we found if you use it with the right approach, that, the pallet changer and being able to take those pallets in and out within a couple of tenths, I mean, it's extremely powerful in the job shop environment just for flexibility. So, but yeah, we got that type of work from early on because we just had a reputation for that. We made some amazing parts in the shop that was behind my house that for some of the biggest name companies you could imagine in the world that people would want to do business for. Now, granted, we're generally 2 two tiers removed from that. So there's somebody getting that work from those big name companies, and then they're kind of subbing it out to us.
Yeah.
We said there's a lot of folks that are better at getting work than we have been, but we're very good at making parts. So a lot of times the parts end up here. We've seen parts come here. People try to, see if we could do them for them, and maybe the money wasn't right. We just said, look, we can't do them for those prices. And then, 10, 12 months later, those same parts will show back up from some other source. And that's happened more than once, but
yeah.
I think that's when we talk about the evolution of where we are now as a company, we've always talked about how do we differentiate ourselves, right? We don't want to compete against everybody. We don't want to be the cheapest. We don't want to be a commodity. And although I even started in a garage, I can't do parts for the same price as I could do 5 years ago, just because how the organization's changed and grown. And I can't. I was learning how to price parts, and I remembered looking at parts, and I'm like, wow, I really priced that too low, now looking back at it. But
sure.
I think one of the things we have to do as an organization, and that we're hot and, we're in hot pursuit of, what I'd say is it's breaking the orbit, right? We have to do parts that a guy can't do in his garage per se, because we can't compete against that cost. And if there's one thing I think the industry could really benefit from, it would be, people not having a race to the bottom on pricing these parts. We don't need price fixing. That's not what I'm saying at all. But, we all need to be smart, and we all need to provide good value to our customers, and we need to have profit so we can have an enduring organization. But there's a lot of times we look at pricing that people are, who knows? I'm not saying that there's not purchasing agents and buyers who haven't said maybe cheaper than what they're getting to us, trying to get us to drop a price or something. But the prices we hear that sometimes people are paying for parts, they just don't match reality of what we're being asked to do from a scope of work requirement. So I would say if we could break that orbit where we're only competing against shops who, are doing, there's a certain way we want to process parts. We want to do the manufacturing planning. We want to bubble the prints. We want to have the in-process inspections. We enjoy doing work that way, right? And that's how we want to do it. We don't want everything to be a fire drill, although there's a certain aspect of that that's fun. But again, I think if I could say anything to the entire industry, is let's don't get in a pricing competition or a pricing war, and let's have a race to the bottom, because that's not helping anybody. I think if anything, we can educate the buyers, even as we've been going through and using the tools within ProShop, because we'd went from such a seat of the pants. Even today, I can quote you 1, 2, 5 parts, high complexity prototype. I can quote you that really fast. But when we start talking about price breaks, we start talking about, NREs and things like that. ProShop has been such a rich tool to break that down. And I even, I told the team the other day when we were talking, I was like, I really just want to write a white paper about how this quoting is one of the most, it seems to me like one of the most archaic aspects of the entire business world. If you would just tell me what you want the part for, and I can tell you very quickly if I can do it or not, right? And it seems foolish to me that people would want to outsource such a critical part of their business. If you have this assembly, I would think it would be in your best interest to understand what your pricing windows are for those components, versus sending it out to 4, 5, 6, 7 random people, and 1 or 2 of those shops quotes it unsustainably low, and then maybe they fall off and they can't support those parts anymore. Now you've priced your entire, and if you do that over and over and over through the sub-assemblies in a big assembly, who knows what the ramifications of that are. So I think, and even talking about customers, we use your customer scorecard, and say, okay, yeah, how do they feel about NRE behavior? And then explaining, hey, if we're quoting against somebody and we have our NRE built in and they're just eating the NRE, then we don't even look competitive, right? But if we quote the NRE and I show you that I can give you better long-term value, why is it better for you to have an NRE? Because now you have skin in the game. You have a reason to come back to me. I'm not bearing the whole burden. It's a cost share. So I think there's a real opportunity, even as we talk about how to revolutionize the customer experience, us working with you to say, look, this is not a one-sided affair. Let me explain to you the benefits of NRE. Let me explain to you the benefits of all these different pricing structures. And even, your past guests on here were talking about, we quote net 30, net 60, net 90. Like, I think that's a wonderful idea. And he was talking about, I think it was the gentleman from Zicky. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. About what does that purchasing agent need to look good to whoever he or she is reporting to, right? Do they need to get everybody on that 90? Do they need, hey, we can work with you on all that stuff. But again, it goes back to that communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How to not have it be a race to the bottom. That is a tricky problem to solve. Right. I mean, there's so many new startup shops, and there's so many variables that feed into that. You could have a shop that normally quotes, higher prices, but they happen to, get into a time where they don't have a lot of work, so they're just looking to fill up their spindles, and so they drop their price, and then that's now the new low bar, right?
Right.
Is so you multiply that out across the 6, 7, 8 vendors that a buyer is quoting. And you can get that dynamic happening. And then, they can't support it. And so they actually give the job back, or they go to business, or who knows what, right? Or,
even if it's just communication with that customer to say, hey, I know we would normally charge this. We just so happen to have some capacity. We can give you a one-time, with an order today, or with an order within the next 5 business days, we can give you a one-time discount. And maybe it's that we're not changing, maybe the way they need to write their purchase order, it needs to be reflected in the per line item pricing. But maybe we're saying, hey, this is the actual number, but we're going to give you a one-time, discount to secure this business while we have additional open capacity or something like that. I just think the better job we can do communicating with the buyers and the purchasing agents, engineers, whoever the stakeholders are on the other side of that conversation. Because when we really begin to break it down, I mean, if you think, and this is not to lessen any other endeavor or trade, but if you think about what a welder or an HVAC person or a plumbing business, a van, $100,000 worth of tools, like, you're good to go. I mean, the capital intensiveness of this industry is brutal, right? And so, again, not every machine not every part needs a premium 5-axis machine with all the bells and whistles. And that's where we can understand that, hey, a nice mid-range 3-axis machine will accomplish this work and this task, and it'll provide good value to the customer. So there's a lot of talk, and I believe that there's a place for us even to try to be a one-stop shop of sorts, but at the same time, you can't be everything to everybody. Find your core competency and then explain to your customers, find the right customers. I think we almost always had a point of pride to say, well, how do you get your work? And we'd say word of mouth, right? With kind of pride, right? And then when we started doing the customer core scorecards, I was kind of like, ooh, our customers aren't that great of a fit, right? Especially as we've changed. So going and finding the customers that are a really good fit is, and if I've taken anything out of my time of listening to you and Kelsey, and I really, really enjoyed the podcast you guys did together. And then Kelsey was able to stop in here and spend about an hour and a half with us one day, and that was such a treat. But the concept of positive sales pressure driving everything in the business, and I was a huge fan of the E-Myth, read it way before I ever heard of Pro Shop. And then when I first heard you, I think it was you were speaking at like a Top Shops or something. This was a good bit ago, and I was listening. I was listening to the words and the lingo. I'm like, this guy's he's talking about the E-Myth, right? And then to find a whole system that was built around the E-Myth, that was pretty exciting to me. But creating the positive sales pressure. That's now we don't think that there is a certain element to word of mouth that's good, but don't confuse that with, being a good fit. Yeah.
No, I agree with you that there is some point of pride, and I hear it in shop owners, and I think I had it for a long time, for a while years ago, where it's like, I don't need to do marketing. I don't need to spend money on marketing because we're so good that we get all this word of mouth business. And that can take you so far, but not necessarily that good, long, sustainable, positive sales pressure, right? I mean, in some niches and some industries, maybe, but I think it's still so important. So I wanted to ask, what are you doing to build that positive sales pressure?
Well, it's a huge focus in the company right now. So I believe one of your former guests had made the statement that, getting from 0 to 1 million is pretty tough. Getting from 1 million to 5 million is a lot tougher, right? And we're in that journey, full on, with really aggressive, goals. Our 10-year goal would to be over 30 million in sales. And so when you start looking at that and thinking about it, what type of, even if you had the best customers, best projects, all that was the best fit in the world to support that type of volume, customers are going to come and go, projects are going to come and go. And as you build it, it's a hungry beast, right? So you have to maybe even break that down into how many salespeople or what type of sales efforts do I need. So we've got some outside folks that we've collaborated with here over the last, I'd say 30 to 60 days. We really began a pretty intensive effort, and even using those customer scorecard, that approach that you had shared in a blog, right? I think you maybe did a full podcast on it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you
Webinar.
Yeah. So, when we're just looking at the niches that fit us, we've always known that we wanted to do a certification, dual certification for AS and ISO. We did a trial run on that just as a company. So we did a pretty heavy ERP investigation back in last half of 2018, first half of 2019. And we really liked, the ProShop product then, but we didn't feel like we were quite there where we could do what we wanted to do financially, or just enough people to keep it
Right. Sure.
Updated the way we wanted. And we did the same thing with AS. We wrote some procedures and we wrote the quality manual and all that, and we said, let's take a trial run. So we do a lot of the things that are there, but we've always been very adamant, like, once you say you do that, you have to do that. You have to keep the records. You have to be very serious about it. So in that, it's completing those certifications here in 2023 is a big part of that sales push. We've got people outside of the organization and outside of me, even though I think that nobody can sell your company like you can because you believe in it and it's your baby. At the same time, in terms of building an enduring organization, I know right now 2 bottlenecks that I clog up a lot are sales and quoting. And so getting those to be delegatable things. Like I said, I can quote those complex, rapid turnaround prototype parts almost in my sleep. But we've really been excited by trying to run down the inputs for direct overhead costs, machine costs, all those things within ProShop, so that we can get quotes and turn that into a scalable, delegatable task. And so the same thing on the sales side, getting other people who understand what we do. But yeah, we're just really going after maybe some different industries. We've always been pretty diversified. I mean, we do everything from power generation to medical, aerospace, communications. I mean, we've just had a really, really wide array of opportunities over the years. And so we fired some customers, we fired some, projects, and said, I guess we have better insight. And again, I know this is not a ProShop podcast, but we have better insight than we've ever had into what it costs us to do something. And I think we're not quite there. It's kind of funny because I said, when we took this on, I said, I think it'll take us 24 months to really get it firing well in all directions, from the machine maintenance to the quality to and I know you can do it faster than that. And we've seen, benefits in every direction, but I'm talking about to really get it like we want it. And maybe not even all the way like we want it, but to get it respectable for us, because we have pretty lofty goals, but, it's a part of it. But I think now, saying I generated this quote here, this estimate, I now executed it, And now I can compare theory versus reality. And I understand that when I come to you with a price, I can sit confidently in that price and say, no, I can't do it any cheaper. Or, hey, if you, if you place that order for, 800 pieces instead of 200 pieces, I can get you the price you want. So being able to have a intelligent conversation to help the customer achieve their goals, right?
Yeah, a data-driven conversation, right?
Yeah. So I think as we talk about, what are we doing, it's really understanding with confidence what those numbers look like. And in terms of building an enduring organization, it's, my definition really of that is, could we take multiple key people out of the organization, put competent people back in those seats, and still get a quality result? And this is part of that. So just like if you were going to sell your company and you're going to go through due diligence and all that entails, it's kind of the same thing with your customer. I mean, that's a selling point that, one of my great points of pride with this organization is, if I could show you some of the pictures of a lot of the parts that we've made, they're amazing, like really complex parts. And especially for a shop our size, there's a lot of shops that can do them, but there's a lot that can't do those parts either, right? And a lot of times in a shop that can do them, there's only one or maybe two people that can do them. We've got 3 or 4 guys that can do them. And that's part of that foundation building and that just laying the groundwork. So I guess all those things are kind of what we say as part of that sales and marketing effort. And it's been we're by no means finished laying the foundation, but it's been this long and laying the foundation to begin to be able to flex those muscles a little bit to the customers and say, hey, we have good systems, we have good processes, we have data-driven, decision making. We've got, a wide array of talent. I mean, if we were to sit down and add up how many years of machining experience, it's insane. Like how much talent we have. And there's a whole another 2 or 3 podcasts worth of effort that we could fill up and, of content that we could fill up in some of the unique ways that we're pursuing folks that have been in this industry for a while, and they just don't want the grind that this industry's had, but they don't want to retire either, right? They want some flexibility with their time. We have some very innovative ways that we've been able to engage those people, both locally and as remote employees, to help us leverage all of that. They just like me and you, right? I mean, we have spent all this time in our career gaining this knowledge, and we love to put it to use, and we love to share it. And there's so many people out there that are in the same boat. So that's how we sell. That's how we want to go and talk to the customers. Look, we're growing. We've put systems in place from IT to software to systems and processes, checks and balances that we can continue to meet your needs even if adversity, comes our way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know I've been talking for a long time about you can't, everyone can put up a website with pictures of their fancy machine, but that is not necessarily what is going to attract a buyer who at the end of the day needs to mitigate risk for their organizations, right? That if they place an order with you, it's going to show up on time, good quality, good paperwork, and then that will continue for years to come. So they're not churning through vendors. I mean, it sounds like that's what you're saying. If you can build those really robust systems, flex that muscle as you go to those clients and say, we are your least risky place-to-place work, and we can do all the we have the supreme technical abilities and then the systems to back that up so they're not fragile. Is that ultimately kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's a very good summary of that approach. Perhaps there's a few more, aspects of it that we want to incorporate, but yeah, by and large, that's what we're saying is we want the buyers or the whoever it is on the other side of that email or that phone call or that conversation. Really, when we're talking about communication, what are your fears? What are your risks? What are your pain points? And how can we be a part of making those go away? Yeah, and it's really you're spot on. Anybody can buy the machines. Anybody can buy the software. It's the team is really the heart and soul. If you don't believe that, just walk in here, one night when nothing's running, and you're like, this is a lot of fancy stuff in here, but without the people, I mean, the people are the heart and soul of everything.
Yeah, indeed. So we have about 5 more minutes before we need to start wrapping up.
Okay.
I'd love to. I have way more questions still than we can fit in that time, and I'm serious about a part 2. Are there any ideas or concepts or suggestions that you think shops should be focusing on or doing right now, besides all the just incredible wisdom you've already dropped?
I would really just say us working together. I mean, there's folks that I guess in this time where we have social media and all these different ways to communicate, it's just amazing, right? There's so many people that I've met and that I've had in this shop. Just last week, I had somebody in here that never met them before in my life, but just know them through social media or knew of them, like you said earlier, admired from afar, right? And just came in and I said, hey, if you're ever in the area, I'd love to have you stop in. And we talked, and there's so many times like that. I guess it's like with customers, right? I try to talk to everybody because you never know when you're going to have that conversation that they need a problem solved, and it's going to change both your lives, really. So kind of the same situation that this gentleman stopped in. He's like, I really don't know why I'm here. I'm like, well, I really don't know what's going to come out of it either. But, an hour or two later, we were just like, wow, we kind of inspired each other in that conversation, and I just think that the overwhelming message I would say is there's enough success for everybody out there. We can, the things that aren't a fit for me, then I'm more than happy to, pass them on and say, hey, is this a fit for you? So, just working together and putting the focus on people. How do we solve those problems? And just, seek the abundance. I just want the company and the folks that are within the organization for us to thrive, right? We've survived and we've done a lot of hard work, but being able to thrive and for the people that have sweat and bled and just been here, for them to really see the fruits of that labor, not only in this company, but in all companies. I mean, take your guys to training, take them to the trade shows, take them to, and that's tough. It's one of the things here that we wonder, like, how do you create? I always said when I started this company, I wanted to allow people to do things like 10 years faster than I did. I wanted them to hit those financial goals and those technical goals like 10 years faster than I did, not have to move to all those different shops, not have to move 350 miles away from their family. But at the same time, there's a appreciation that kind of, by having to go through those steps, there's a gratitude that comes with that. So how do you balance giving people those wonderful opportunities, but also that they value that experience and that they pass it on? So if anybody has any insight on how that we do that successfully, we've done a respectable job at it, but I'd say focusing on your people and just empowering them. The word that you used earlier is it's just empower your folks to realize their potential.
So if people do have thoughts and want to reach out to you, how would you suggest they do that?
Well, you can always email me at ddyer@concisecnc.com.
I'll make sure that's on the website.
Yeah, we're on Instagram as well, and I've got plans to have a podcast of my own coming up. So that'll be coming out as well. So maybe we can pick up part of this conversation there.
That would be amazing. Well, Dwain, this has been an absolute delight. You are. I love the approach you're taking with building your business. I think it will result in an enduring business. I have no doubt about it. So thank you for sharing that approach with everybody. I know some people like to keep that more close to the vest, but you've been awesome with sharing. So thank you for joining me. And I know people are going to get a ton out of this. And appreciate you being on the show.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me and this platform and everybody that it reaches. And I know this is time out of your schedule and you've got a lot of things to do, but I appreciate your giving back to the industry and just letting us all have this platform to share.
Awesome, Dwain. All right. Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.